Welcome, residents, to the Dr. DC podcast. My name is producer Richard, and next to me is the Doctor himself.
Hello.
Each week, we talk about the weird and wonderful world of DC while fielding questions from listeners like you. Today, we are joined by the writers of the audio drama King Kirby, based on their play of the same name. It's Fred Van Lente and Crystal Skillman.
Yeah, welcome.
Hello.
Howdy.
So happy to have you.
Yeah,
here.
so excited. And you guys have been doing the rounds lately because you've got the audio drama out of King Kirby. So congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I saw a little bit of
yeah.
just like, I think it was posted on Twitter. There was like a small video captured of you guys going through it. And I was just like,
Right.
I was floored.
Yeah.
I was like, that. First of all, that Stan impression is incredible.
Yeah, Nat Cassidy plays Stan, and he does a great job.
Really
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's really awesome. Really cool.
So funny.
Okay, I want to start by just saying
You got your prop here?
I've got my prop. I brought props. I love the play. It's
I love you. You're holding it in your very hand.
yeah, I've got it right there. I've got it so I could look at it and just remember how much I like it. What was it?
An interview with us that's in the forward of that book, right?
That's
Yes,
right.
I
So-
did, which is
More importantly, why you have it, right?
I think it's the biggest thing I've ever done is to ride your coattails to the front of that book. Yeah.
There you go.
Why don't we start with what was it initially when you were writing the play that made you need to tell the story of Jack Kirby? I mean, obviously for our listeners who know a little bit about comics, we know Jack is historically underappreciated, but what was it that made you need to turn that into something?
I just thought it was a great story. You know, I'm primarily a storyteller, and way back in like 1999, 2000, I was writing a biography about Jack, more as just sort of a personal kind of hobby project. This is really before I had broken into the mainstream comic book industry in any big way. But basically, I just kind of hit a wall with the biography. I hit a wall with like some of the sources I was trying to track down, and I was dating Crystal at the time, and she was a playwright, and so I kind of like just basically copied her. And was like, she can do it, I can do it. And I wrote a draft of the play that was much, I don't know if I'd call it crazier than the one that you've heard and read.
Right.
But it had a lot more like adaptations of like various comic book stories, and like,
Right.
you know, I think the origins of the Fantastic Four and Captain America were in there, but like with the serial numbers like filed off, and there was like a new god, this like cosmic armored new god character running around, narrating the whole thing, and it sort of was, it had this kind of cosmic frame around it. But this was, you know, it was very much kind of ahead, not to say it was too, I mean, it was a little ahead of its time, you know. I mean, I think the first X-Men movie had just come out.
Right.
The first Sam Raimi
There
Spider-Man
wasn't
movie
the
had
same
just come
kind
out.
of, there wouldn't be the same kind of recognition that there is now.
Yeah, the
with
Marvel
an audience.
brand was just very different.
So this goes back that far.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
Wow.
then it just kind of sat in a drawer for about 15 years, I'd say, until the Brick here in New York, the Brick Theater did a comic book theater festival, and Chris was like, "Hey, remember that Jack Kirby play you wrote?"
Yeah.
And that was like 2014 or something, I think.
Well, I probably originally it was 2012, right? Because we tried to do it for the first one,
The
but
first
then
time.
I was having troubles with. By that point, I was a Marvel exclusive, and the Jack Kirby heirs were suing Marvel, and Marvel got very threatening to me about some of the comics I'd been doing with Ryan Dunleavy Comics, which was talking about Kirby's, you know, attack to get his artwork back in the 80s, which takes up the large portion of what will be episode 4, which is the only episode that, as we're recording this, has not come out yet.
Right.
Yeah. So Crystal actually gamely adapted another comic series of me and Ryan, Action Philosophers Instead, and we put that in the back burner. And when Marvel made good on its threats to not renew my contract, which I sort of assumed they were going to do anyway or not do anyway, by the time the festival came about again, we were like, screw it, we're going to do King. There's nothing to lose. Let's just do King Kirby anyway.
Yeah, right.
And it was a big hit. And we got this loving New York Times review, and it's been done all, many, many times. And the opportunity presented to us, this is a bit of a pandemic
love project.
Yeah, like a hobby, like stuck inside project, because when we were approached about, hey, do you want to adapt King Kirby into audio? We were like, we already have this recording anyway of the cast doing it in 2014, which we gave out to our Kickstarter backers.
Right.
Let's just add, and then Crystal contacted one of her close collaborators, Bobby Cronin.
And he is the composer of the musical Mary Max, which is adapted from this kind of cult indie movie, black and white claymation movie.
Right.
So he's very creative, and we work on many, many projects together. And it was dreaming on that audio because the performances were so great. Fred's reading the stage directions. Well, how do we get scene to scene in just the listening experience and use this audio? And I thought that soundscape is going to mean everything. And in particular, I wanted a modern kind of soundscape that reflected the futuristic imagination of Jack Kirby. Like, the play really starts in a way with his today in some ways, or our today, and then goes through his life. So I think that it's really powerful to hear the music with the audio telling the story. And then Bobby is a great editor as well and edited it together. So the storytelling, it really feels like a great listening experience, which is great to know, because I love it that we're doing a lot on audio, but I think you got to tap into what makes the audio experience like really special.
Yeah. And I mean, the dialogue, the text itself, it's all from the play. But the thing that I really like about listening to the episodes in the audio format is it feels so snappy. Like it has like the rhythm of what my idea of that era is.
Yeah.
But how did you go about kind of finding, we know sort of Stan Lee's kind of public voice, and that's very sort of like present, but how did you go about finding like the right authentic kind of Kirby when writing his dialogue, when writing him speaking as himself?
Well, Kirby, I just had to talk like a thing. Like I was just a stereotypical, kind of thing, which, most of that was Stan wrote a lot of that dialogue, but then Kirby wrote plenty of streetwise characters himself. I mean, he's a very oft interviewed person, so it's not like it's not like we lacked for research, And, but the real Kirby ends up talking very it's somewhat stereotypical, but very cosmically, like he always talks like, just the Captain America was born out of this urge of the country. He almost kind of erases himself from his own story, but. So to a certain extent, when we came with the fictional Kirby, we kind of ground him a little bit more than even really the real Kirby was, Yeah.
And he also has, I think what was fun about the draft that Fred gave me that we started to build upon as we started to work on it together is, he's a character you want to follow because he has this skill and this love and it pours out of him, and he has this expression, these ideas. But at the same time, everyone values it so highly. And even in war, with him being used to draw, as a scout. So everybody craves this talent that he has, but he is invested in the next story. And so that kind of humility in a way, so he's so grand, but he also has a very grounded way of working. And I think that's just something now more than ever in a pandemic where we're working so hard. I think people hear this story in such a different way. But even in 2014, people were so moved by his story that they, people that didn't know, just knew Captain America and just knew the characters and knew of Stan Lee because he's so famous. We're just like, I want more stories like this. I want to know more about my creators. And I was like, that's great, because that's the point. And Fred's passion for that is really what ignited the project.
Yeah. I mean, it's so cool. I mean, I think I asked this of you way back at the time, but now sort of with the lens of the audio, taking something that like comics, and especially Kirby's contributions, which are all visual, and then translating them to like a more sort of kinetic medium like theater, and now removing the visual entirely. How do you navigate some of that? Because I know the stage play itself, you can put some of that kind of energy and that sort of visually onto the stage and into the performance. How do you keep some of like Kirby's essence in the audio beyond just like how he spoke?
I think that has to do a lot with Steve and his performance,
and a lot to do with Bobby and his music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it was a performance that was lived in. So the audio has this incredible richness to it, because it wasn't just that we got in there for 2 days of rehearsal and taped it. They had done several performances, and then we got together a few months later. So you have that, but then also Stephen, just all of them as voiceover actors, they're all really accomplished. They took that performance, but then they were really adjusted naturally into the mic in a way that they elevated even more what they were doing, but it still felt grounded and real. So it was really incredible to see. And I think that actually ended up being a second take, because the first one didn't work out. So, and that was like maybe a month before.
Yeah, we attempted to do it at a totally different space, and unfortunately the recorder crapped out on us. So we lost the whole thing, which was, talk about, sound technician's nightmare. Yeah, but fortunately, Midtown Comics actually approached us to do the play as an episode of their podcast. So we actually taped that whole thing and you saw that on the YouTube video.
Yeah.
We taped that whole thing in a comic book store in Midtown Comics downtown on Fulton Street here in New York after hours. And that was sort of a neat experience unto itself.
And you could see it in that behind the scenes video that there's this kind of this energy between them. It's like they were just on. And so it was just one of those magic days. I mean, it was really cool. And we all had to, you could feel the love in the air with that. And so that performance is so incredible. I have found in writing for audio, and Fred's pitching and working on some new audio stuff too. I have found that incredibly visual work actually translates incredibly well, because if it wasn't just like showy visual, like a projection, and it was truly theatrical, there probably was a great sound with that, right? If you were in a pool, that's great. We have the sound of waves, right? So truly visual work and interpreting it for audio actually, could speak to going back to TV and vice versa. Like we're seeing it with Limetown and a lot of other shows getting picked up right now. And so like it's just very, very interesting to think about. I also think here's something where low budgets speak to each other, and what a beautiful thing. Like that's kind of one of my favorite things, because in theater, and I'm so excited for it to come back, and there's so many voices that have been unheard thus far that we'll be hearing more of, I hope, and more access for that. However, at the same time, budget, right? It's always difficult, right? Like, so but indie theater, this really audio drama is really made for indie theater and in anything independent. Number one, because you can go anywhere, to see it. So that's super great. And even though it was visual, we were in a festival performance situation. The play had to be 75 minutes. Right. Another set would have to come on. So we really couldn't have a grand set. We did have 1 million props, but that translates well into audio, because we can hear the ruffling of the pages. We can hear the drawing. So that works. But I think that's in a way you get to concentrate more on the performance. The visual aspect you did capture in the original was you saw the progression of comic book page. Like you could see that was kind of a really lovely detail that the director John Hurley worked out. That plotting map is insane, but you saw when it's blank, when it's being filled, when there's being sketched, when it's being inked. And Fred and I really had to work behind the scenes with our comic book artist friends. I'm not sure if Dean's pages worked into there. I think maybe Riley Brown helped us. So like you were actually seeing artwork on stage. That work was created by comic book industry folk.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that we're seeing that success with comic books to like audio format, like coming up a lot right now. Anyways, with like the Sandman audio play that's been coming out.
Shift to audio.
I think at the end of the day, with comic books, it's like because you're not seeing moving imagery at them for the most part, it's so much directed through narration and through dialogue. Anyway, it's that there's such a direct correlation, I think, from comic books to.
Well, it's funny too bringing up the low budget thing, because it kind of feels like the theater and audio thing also feels as scrappy as like the early days of some of these like comic publishers, right? We're just like, here's, like we'll pay you like $1 for every page you do, just get it out. Like it's kind of interesting that way too.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Right.
Yep. It's having a renaissance here, but in the UK, it's always been prevalent. I think because they appreciate really edgy work, and they do a lot of it.
Yeah, we got lots of questions.
Yeah, we did.
Not just about Kirby's work, but also about Kirby, and who better to kind of speak to those things than you two who have spent so much time living in his world.
Yeah.
Should we
let's jump
to
into the questions for today. First, we're gonna go to Twitter.
Twitter.
First question comes from Adam Talking Superman, who asks, why was OMAC, his best and most relevant DC book, never finished?
There does seem to be a thread of Jack's work that just didn't get finished, or didn't get finished the way he wanted it to be finished.
Well, yeah. So I saw some of these on Twitter, so I looked some of them up. I can't claim to have a totally encyclopedic knowledge of Jack Kirby, but the two I saw on Twitter, I looked up the answer to. So I did cheat and did my homework.
Oh, that's fine. That's more than I usually do for this.
So the main reason Kirby went to DC in the first place, other than his general dissatisfaction of dealing with Stan Lee and having Stan take all the credits for all of his ideas, was that Carmine Infantino, who he'd known forever, and it was kind of a big deal when he became editor-in-chief of DC Comics, because in those days, artists never became editor-in-chief. Right. So Carmine kind of tempted Kirby over there, and he famously had a tough time with New Gods, Mr. Miracle, and Forever People. Those first two got canceled pretty quickly. Mr. Miracle kind of became kind of a humdrum superhero book once it got severed from the source, I like to say. And it became more generic. But Commandy and the Demon both sold pretty well. But he was developing other things for them. And basically the bottom line is that he was so frustrated at DC, and Carmine Infantino had been replaced, that Kirby jumped ship again back to Marvel. And basically he just ended. He was so frustrated with DC, he just let OMAC just kind of end.
Right. Which is too bad, because...
and that was, I think, the last one of...
Oh, sorry. You just froze there. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I just stopped talking.
Okay. It's too bad, because OMAC is one of those like really great kind of unique Kirby ideas, right? Like the space satellite that beams your powers down to you, and you become this other thing. It's such like a visual kind of thing too, right? It's too bad, because OMAC does feel like it's in a little forgotten corner of Kirby creations a little bit.
DC really wanted to be a spin-off of Commandy, which was a book that was probably his most successful DC book from that era sales-wise, but Kirby just had no interest in doing that, and he literally just stopped. And in fact, the end panel of the last issue of OMAC is a cliffhanger that you can tell how fed up Jack Kirby was, because he was just like giving the finger and like, I'm out. So they actually had to change, the production department actually had to change the last panel to have it be, and it just sort of like ends with an explosion. It's a bit nonsensical, but you know, what are you gonna do?
I think someone came in, like a different creative team later came in and did tie it more to Commandy. I think is OMAC meant to be like his grandfather or something like that? Someone came in later and made
other way around, but no, you said it right. Yeah, it is like great grandfather or something
like that. They made a connection where there wasn't one, which does seem to be a running thread with how DC treated Kirby's work. But...
right.
Yeah, I think we got that one.
Yeah,
that's great.
Awesome. Let's go to the next question from Braydon. The Donkey Rises.
Just a crazy Twitter handle.
Can you elaborate on why Kirby doesn't get more credit with his Marvel work as he does his DC work? I know Stan Lee got the majority of the recognition.
For those listening who maybe don't really know where that friction started or came from, can you give a bit of context for why or how even Stan Lee managed to get all of the credit and Kirby kind of got forgotten for a bit there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, basically, the In Crystal, if you want to jump in at any time, knock yourself out. Basically, Stan ran Marvel as a very tight ship for the longest time, particularly in the late 50s, when Kirby showed up there the first time after his second sojourn in DC, which ended in complete disaster, an even bigger disaster, believe it or not, than the third time, which was the time we were just talking about, because there were lawsuits involved in the second time. We can get in that if you want. Stan would basically, every once in a while, there was a typed up guidance to the artist, but 9 times out of 10, he would call up the artist on the phone, the artist would come in, they would talk about it in the room, and then the artist would go off and draw the story, which is to say, I, being a professional comic book writer, I sit down and I write a script, not unlike a play script with scene directions and dialogue. Stan didn't do that. At best, you got a 2-page little sort of springboard, and then the artist was expected to just go home and figure it out, actually do all the
and I should just point out everything Fred's saying is this is the third episode is out right now, and the climax of the third episode gets lays the groundwork for this, and the very beginning of where Kirby is enticed because he has more liberty without a script to create by drawing and create the story, which is what he wanted. And episode 4 kind of goes into what Fred's about to say, which is how that plays out.
And so Stan, and then the artist would bring the art in, and then Stan would dictate to a secretary or to the letter or whatever, like what the actual dialogue would be. So he was there at the conception, and he was adding the dialogue. A lot of times Kirby, and I remember Ditko and a bunch of other artists would actually write suggestions the dialogue should be in the margins of the artboards that would then get erased. But he got full writing credit. He was getting a full page rate for it. He was getting a script page rate, even though he never actually wrote a script. It helped, and basically it's good. I mean, it's a classic story of it's good to be the boss. Yeah. And so because he was in charge, he was the one doling out the credit. And because his sort of avuncular presence was such a through line through all the comics, there was that continuity there. He basically became, synonymous with Marvel. When Marvel hit big culturally in the 60s, Stan was the guy getting the interviews and the guy speaking at Carnegie Hall and having Fellini and various little filmmakers come to Marvel and say, we like very much of your comics. That's in episode 4. That's I'm quoting myself in Tim Cowan's great performance with Fellini in episode 4 of King Kirby, which is absolutely true. It was the thing that happened. And so when Kirby left Marvel to go to DC to do New Gods and Friends in the late 60s, 1970, Marvel started cranking out books like Origins of the Marvel Comics and Son of Origins and Bring on the Bad Guys, and these books that I grew up with as a 70s kid, which were said by Stan Lee, and just made it sound like that Stan was the guy coming up with all the ideas and the stories, and his sidekicks, the artists, were simply drawing them. Right. When in fact, what you learn is that Stan rarely wrote anything, and how much of the character concepts and how much of the stories and so forth can be attributed to him is very murky. Later in life, Kirby said he did literally all of it. Now, there's a lot of reason not to believe that either. Right. But, the problem isn't even that Kirby doesn't get 50% of the credit. I mean, I think by all, logical, by the standards certainly by today's standards, what Stan did was primarily an editor. That job is not being a writer. That's being an editor. And there's very few editors who would say, William Faulkner's editors not take credit for Sound of the Fury. You know what I mean? It's not, it's a very bizarre thing. And only in the sort of the weird Wild West of comics where nobody was paying any attention and there were no professional standards and anything went, could you get away with what Stan Lee did. Right. And to anyone who thinks that, but when Kirby went and did New Gods, a lot of people didn't like his dialogues, particularly compared to Stan Lee's more kind of natural rhythms. I mean, Stan did have an ear for dialogue that Kirby didn't. I don't think that's deniable. People who are on the pro Stan side really have no comeback for the simple fact that Stan Lee was doing comics for 20 years before Jack Kirby showed up. And then suddenly when Jack Kirby worked there, he was incredibly successful. And then when Jack Kirby left, Stan Lee's creative input, other than the first issue of She-Hulk, and everyone's favorite Ravage 2099, who could forget that great Stan Lee creation, and of course Stripperella, the Pam Anderson vehicle, we don't really get anything from Stan creatively, while Kirby has these incredible DC properties. He came back to Marvel, and did Devil Dinosaur, which is about to be a TV show. He did Eternals, which is about to be a movie. He did Machine Man. I'm sure that's being developed right now. Machine Man started in my best-selling Marvel comic, Marvel Zombies 3. So I
That's awesome.
I have a certain fondness for Machine Man. I think that covers it.
Yeah. I mean, because it's so fraught, like there's so much research, there's so much murkiness, and I think a lot of people maybe just hear like, Kirby doesn't get enough credit, Stan took the credit, but they maybe don't know the mechanisms like that. I mean, similarly, like the Bob Kane, Bill Finger, saga and things like that, And
Bob Kane and Stanley went to the same high school in the Bronx and loved each other, which is unique because if you know anything about Bob Kane, everyone in comics hated his guts.
Yeah.
Except for Stan Lee. There is game knows game, as they say in the streets.
It's also the art form, I think, too, because if we look at even though theater, obviously film, I mean anything, there is a lot to talk about with different collaborators and collaborations and who did what. However, if we have a film, we have a script, and then, we break it down into shots, and then it gets, everybody has their job, and they're all interpreting that script or revising that script as they go, or whatever exactly is happening on set.
Right.
Here you have the comic book artist getting a scenario in this particular thing. Doing the thumbnails, so breaking it down. So he's breaking down action and how we're seeing it, and that is storytelling.
Yeah.
So I think there's just also, that to the conversation that at the time it wasn't really being looked at like that, and really a comic book artist is showing you the shot. They're showing you what you see. In the cases of a writer writing a script, it's a bit different because you are saying what's in each panel and you're having that collaboration with the artist. But certainly from a scenario, Fred has a great book called Make Comics Like the Pros that I use for teaching a bit with Greg Pak. And in it, he has a great example like that where he shares a scenario of
a Marvel plot.
A Marvel plot. And
Riley Brown drew, actually.
And you actually have to break before you're not supposed to turn the page,
right?
And you have to break it down yourself. And it's a great exercise. And then you see what Riley actually did.
Yeah.
I think also it has a lot of this, a lot of Stan's defenders point out that Stan always mentioned Jack about what a great artist they were and blah, blah, and Stan didn't, was a passive participant in a lot of this, which to me doesn't actually exonerate him.
Yeah.
But I think that to look at it more sympathetically to everybody involved is that people don't really care for nuance. Like they want to think everybody, it's like Peanuts, right? It's like Charles Schultz. One guy's in a room drawing it,
Right.
I can't tell you how many people I meet think one good person, that Matt Groening draws every episode of The Simpsons.
Right.
Like, they don't care really. And it's just easier to remember this guy, Stan Lee. He's funny. He has a cameo in all the movies like Alfred Hitchcock. Isn't that great? And they just don't give a shit. Ultimately a lot of this just comes down to apathy.
Right.
Without, you don't necessarily need to subscribe a lot of malice to it, although I do think there was some malice.
Right, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it always comes back to that balance between the genius and the visionary. I mean, you see it with Steve Jobs and Wozniak. I think that at the end of the day, the when people talk about brands, they talk about advertising more than they talk about a product. And I think at the end of the day, it's easier to see the thing that's facing the audience and talking to them rather than the thing creating behind it, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's when Kirby leaves Marvel, suddenly he's leaving that shadow, right? So suddenly he gets to stand on his own, and he's just seen for the work he's producing rather than being seen under the shadow of the tree that is Stan Lee.
Yeah, that's true.
And, people who are used to the Kirby stuff, or excuse me, the Marvel stuff, were probably pretty shocked by a lot of the New God stuff. And, another one of the big comic book mysteries is we'll never really understand why DC canceled New Gods and Forever People, because Janet Kahn, when she became publisher of Marvel Comics 4 or 5 years later, said she went into the sales reports and she was like, I mean, they weren't blowing the barn doors up, but they were solid sellers. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they were outselling certainly some of the older superheroes. So that's another sort of big mystery is who killed the New Gods and why.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like the way you put that, Fred.
Yeah.
It's a mystery.
That's a great one to move on from, I think.
All right, let's do it. Yeah.
All right, next question. Oh, this is a great one from Rick to the E, who asks, what's your favorite Kirby creation at either company?
Oh, geez.
Oof.
Creation or co-creation.
Yeah.
Something that Kirby was involved in.
Yeah.
Just I'll let you field that one first.
Well, I am so it was either Marvel or DC, right?
Yeah.
Anywhere, yeah.
Well, the Scarlet Witch, I'm so, and obviously she's having a rebirth and a heyday in an episodic series. But going back through the comics, Fred was doing a piece for 13th Dimension. So it was she's just a remarkable character. And also, then we followed just that through line for all the Avenger films, and I was like, oh, that's the most interesting thread actually, is this whole thing. So so that's just a recent passion. And I would just say, in terms of for the DC thing, I just think New Gods is incredibly impressive. Like, I think the world, it's interesting you said it was shocking. It's a startling, it's one of those things where, was it in the George Lucas, world of like, I'm going to take my Kurosawa, I'm going to take my New Gods, I'm going to take my Joseph Campbell, but for a reason. I mean, it's incredible storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, I really, it's actually kind of tough, just because as I've gotten older, like, I just love so much of the Kirby stuff in a way I sort of was attracted to the Lee stuff as a kid. I can't say DC the Demon is hands down my favorite. I just love the whole sort of design, that kind of Hal Foster ripoff design that Kirby famously did. And I just love his whole milieu of being like a weird, like, monster fight, like a monster who fights monsters. I mean, what more do you need? I struggle between my favorite Marvel Thor Kirby comic being Thor, which I think actually Fantastic Four, his Fantastic Four, in terms of world building, although I really like Fantastic Four. And I guess I really love the Eternals, and I always have. I think that's a great, solid 12, 13 issues. I am probably one of the few people actually prefers the Eternals to the New Gods.
Ooh,
I just think it's a more streamlined concept.
Where did we just see the baby demon, by the way? It was so cute.
On the Justice League cartoon.
Oh my gosh!
When Morgan Le Fay turns them all, the Jack Kirby design of Morgan Le Fay in the Justice League, I think it's Justice League Unlimited. Turns them all into babies, and Etrigan shows up as a baby.
And he just keeps fighting them.
That's a great episode. I love that one so much. Yeah. Do you have a favorite Kirby creation?
I mean,
either company?
I think the thing that draws me to, for me, the New Gods is such an interesting thing, right? Because I love the juxtaposition between this like straight-laced, square, sort of like hippie-hating creator who creates basically like a laser light show, like comic. I think that that balance is so funny to me, but it's this sort of combination between this sort of like.
Why do you think he's a hippie hater?
It just, the feeling that I get from him, rather
he's
than
kind of like, World War II vet with a cigar chomped in his mouth.
100%.
I mean, what's funny is the hippies would take pilgrimages to California and go hang out with the Kirbys and Roz and make them tuna fish sandwiches and order. No, the other thing is that she'd order McDonald's. They would just go out and get massive bags of McDonald's for everybody.
They had a kind of hippie-ish or the 70s-ish open door family thing.
That's awesome.
Totally, because if you just look at the guy, it's like you would never
first glance.
You'd
not
never
what you might expect.
It's interesting. It's really interesting to hear those stories, and but also you have this tough guy image.
Especially because all of the images that I have from him, I won't do the impression because I know that I'm not going to be seen.
No.
Anyways, we have this ongoing thing throughout the thing that I think he sounds like in his older age interviews. He sounds like Winnie the Pooh to me, but that's I'm left alone.
Interesting.
I'm left alone with this thought, but I stand by it. But
Stephen Rattazzi, who plays Kirby in our show, absolutely just made a very conscious decision not to actually try to sound like literal Jack Kirby. And some people have sort of like, well, it doesn't sound like, it's not exact, but I think he does a great job.
Well, and it's inspired other. We do hope this will ignite when we return to the theater. New productions of the play, and I have been written by at least 3 or 4 awesome actors that are like, please keep me in mind. I would love to be Kirby. So hopefully there'll be several for all of them, and one in particular feels like he could do the voice and wants to do that. So hey, spin-offs. Like,
ooh, yes.
Ooh.
That's sorry. Are you saying New Gods?
Yeah, I'm saying New Gods. What about you?
I'm going to do the really impossible thing here and just try and pick a New God. It's definitely New Gods for me generally, but I think it's Granny Goodness.
Really?
I love Granny Goodness. I love the design. I love just the idea, like this perversion of something that's supposed to be nurturing, but she runs this torture orphanage. I love like
played by Ed Asner, and
the Ed Asner voice is just in my head now for Granny Goodness. Like there's so many pieces, not all of them are Kirby, I guess, but like there's so many pieces of that, and I'm fascinated by that as a character.
Right.
You know, especially some of the New Gods feel like they're filling in really kind of specific kind of Norse or like kind of Greek thing, like Light Ray. Like, fine, you got your kind of your god of light. That's your kind of like Apollo guy. You like there are some that feel like they fit that, and Granny Goodness feels like new, kind of like original, unique a little bit, but it's that sort of like dangerous, not quite nurturing figure. Like she's not even 100% the villain of Mr. Miracle. She's bad, but she's not. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's her.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Thumbs up.
All right, let's go to the next question from Brandon M. Flick, who asks, The Hunger Dogs. Was there some editing shenanigans going on at that time? Pages moved around, etc.
This is one where I had to do some reading.
I don't think I've heard of this.
Yes, I actually read up on that this morning. So
I think this is like kind of, it feels like an almost similar scenario to the OMAC thing, where they didn't like the way he was going to end New Gods, which would have been to kill Orion and Darkseid. And then they had to sort of parlay it into something else, which became this Hunger Dogs series, right?
Well, so what happened is they were, Kirby famously was left Marvel and kind of left comics to a certain degree altogether in the 80s and was doing a lot of work in animation, primarily for Ruby Spears, makers of Thunder the Barbarian.
Yeah.
Alex Toth designed the main characters, Thunder Barbarian, but pretty much everything else was designed by Jack Kirby.
Oh, wow. Right.
So I'm annoyed you can't get it on streaming anywhere.
I'm trying to the Hunger Dogs. I feel like I want to.
Grab that book over there.
Oh, well,
See, I told you I was reading up on this morning.
Wow.
It's the one with Darkseid on the cover.
Oh, yeah.
So apparently what happened was they were, yes.
There it is.
God, I wish I could do that with my wife and go, what's the one with Darkseid in the cover? And she'd know what I was talking about.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So also there's only one book line over there, so
fair. Yeah, okay, fair.
The point being, so what it was all very complicated because they wanted to do this in their new graphic novel format, and the draft that Kirby submitted, according to Mark Evanier, who's sort of the expert and former Kirby assistant, he's the expert in all things Kirby, said basically DC was like, this just isn't very good,
right?
And Joe Orlando, the editor, had to fly out to California and tell Jack that. And Jack was like, you know what? I agree with you. It's not very good.
Wow.
So he did all the rewrites and all the changes you see are all him. I think the problem was they lost their inker halfway through. So the pages looked weirdly different formatted because pages were inked and lettered by a different person. So that's why there's a disparity. Yeah. And I read it this morning. Like I said, it's only about 64 pages long or something like that. And, I just think that Kirby had changed in the 15 years since he originally done New Gods, and don't forget the sort of big New Gods revival in the 80s was partly because Kenner, makers of your favorite Star Wars figures, were put out the Superpowers line, of which Darkseid and Desaad and Kalibak were major bad guys, and they were on the Super Friends cartoon. So I think Kirby got paid more money for Darkseid for those characters for Super Friends than anything he'd ever done at Marvel, and certainly anything he'd ever done before.
Yeah.
So he's like, I'm getting royalties off these, why would I kill them all?
Well, yeah, because that was the sort of compromise, because the original thing was that Orion would kill Darkseid and die in the process, sort of thing. And the kind of the trade-off that I think is in Hunger Dogs is that it's like they call them the Hunger Dogs, but it's basically like the lowlies of Apocalypse rise up and overthrow Darkseid. So it spoils Darkseid without killing him, kind of.
Spoiler alert. So what happens is that Darkseid seeds all these bombs into New Genesis, and to the point where New Genesis explodes, and everyone in Apocalypse freaks out and just starts destroying Apocalypse because the dichotomy has been severed. Except Highfather's actually purposely blown up New Genesis to sort of screw you to Darkseid.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, Supertown, where all the new gods live, floats away into space, and so the planet blows up, but everybody's fine. And Darkseid is like, oops, because he didn't. Like, it didn't occur to him that just by destroying this one half of the economy, he would be the only one left for the Hunger Dogs to vent their rage on it.
Yeah.
And Orion gets a girlfriend and is like, screw you, I'm out of here, and leaves. And that's basically it's a kind of a very interesting. I thought it was kind of satisfying. Like, I don't know, reading it, as an older person, I was like, cool. And the art's great, and the coloring is a little strange, but. And they had to weirdly reformat it to make it fit this graphic novel format. And now this book that Crystal has, the fourth volume of the Fourth World Omnibus, is regular comic book size. So Hunger Dogs is the wrong size for that. So it looks really weird.
Right. Yeah. Right on.
Age? Do you think age also had a little bit to do with it? With his eyes?
Well, his eyesight was going, his hands were going.
That's what Mark Evan.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. All right, let's leave Twitter and head on over to Instagram.
Now we're going to Instagram, take some questions and answer them.
Wow, that is such a pulled back version of that song. Are you a little nervous because people you respect are on the podcast?
This is the mode we're in. We have a guest, and I get embarrassed by how bad our show is.
Finally, people we actually respect on the podcast.
I know, you can tell. You can tell. It's like, oh, normally there's no respect in this room.
Yeah, Kyle's on the show. Pff, get out of here. All right, first question from Instagram from Agent_Sanchez, who asks, please talk about the mythological influences in Jack Kirby's work. I feel like I'm taking an ancient history lesson while on acid when I see his art. Is there any one mythology he used more than others?
I mean, I think there is.
Yeah.
It seems to be the Norse one, right? I mean, you call it out in the play, and I think doesn't New Gods riff on an idea he had for Thor?
Right. Yeah. Well, in the first issue of New Gods, it's pretty clearly the Marvel Asgard that's blowing up. When he talks about the New Gods dying, and so maybe a lot of people have sort of interpreted that as him trying to stick it to Stan Lee, but I think that I think that the New Gods was sort of an idea that he had growing out of the cosmic ideas of Thor.
Yeah.
Wow. And then, I mean, then the other thing would be the Incan mythology, which is the heavy influence on Eternals, because the Celestials have come down to this space city,
right?
That's run by Ajax, who is posing essentially as an Incan god. And then we invoked Greg Pak earlier. When Greg and I did Incredible Hercules, we played a lot. We had a lot of fun playing with that some kind of South American influence.
I mean, I haven't, as someone who hasn't read Eternals and knows nothing about it or this upcoming movie, how deep does it go into some of that mythology?
The Eternal series?
Yeah, does it go real deep into the sort of Incan,
the way that like Thor does a bit into the Norse?
Not really. I mean, it's not like Thor has much to do with the actual Norse myth. You know what I mean? Like, they're just sort of springboard for Kirby insanity, and Eternals, the obvious, conceit of Eternals is pretty easy to wrap your brain around, which is all these gods and all these myth characters that are all these eternal super beings that were created by space gods on Earth. Satan, Circe of the Odyssey, and Ajax. The Tecumseh. No, I'm not pronouncing that right, but that's who Ajax is associated with in South America. All these are real people, right, who who are all offshoots of regular humanity who've lived through centuries and centuries and centuries.
Right.
I've sort of been semi paying attention to the movie news. They're introducing a lot of stuff that is post Kirby that appeared in, of all places, Bob Harris's Avengers run.
Oh, okay.
That's where the Dane Whitman of it all comes from. Notice the guy from Game of Thrones is playing Black Knight. That's because Cersei was in the Avengers in the 90s.
Right.
So that's where that's all. I have no idea how that's all going to, at the end of what last one. I'm always sort of impressed with how the MCU people just kind of put everything in a big pot. And so it's interesting, the John Byrne White Vision shows up. Spoiler alert. And
yeah, sort of that is a big spoiler, Fred. But I think everyone's watching pretty up to date.
We don't really believe in spoilers.
It's one thing to spoil it on the Friday it comes out between like midnight and like 6 p.m. Several days later. I don't know when this podcast is airing.
We've definitely spoiled things on this show.
Oh God,
before.
actively spoiling. Sometimes I do it just out of spite.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like Kirby likes to tie things even loosely to other mythologies. Yeah. You know, you brought up the demon before. That's Arthurian legend and things like that. Did he ever did he in interviews, did he say like, well, it was about that, or is it just simply that he just loves that kind of,
he's a big dork and he
scope,
wants to talk about
like the sort of cosmic scope of those.
I mean, I'm kind of into the big dork theory. I mean, you know, Kirby was just a lifelong inveterate reader, and when he passed, his widow Rob was talking about how they just had boxes and boxes of these science fiction pulps.
Right.
Like that was his favorite thing was science fiction pulps. You know, in the late 80s when he was really sparring with Marvel, he was incredulous that anyone could believe that Stan Lee could come up with the X-Men. My favorite quote was, Stan Lee doesn't know what a mutant is. Like, he has no idea what he's talking about. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like Kirby got all this the science fiction stuff from the pulps, you know, where
sure.
You know, weird kids with psychic powers, but just a fairly common staple of the 50s and 60s pulps.
Wow.
Interesting. That's awesome.
I love that. That's incredible. All right, let's go to the next question, whose name invokes a feeling of the KFC fries that I had last night. Okay. Yes, it comes from Cursed Blob.
Very nice.
Who asks me, what's the best entry point to start reading New Gods? Wow.
I'm like, other than just the beginning.
Yeah. That's hard.
You know, but that's not it depends if you're talking about the editions, right? Because DC keeps cranking them out in this weird, like the thing that we were just referencing earlier, the Jack Kirby's Fourth World Omnibus puts them all out in publication order, starting with, so you get a lot of Jimmy Olsen, you know, which is where Darkseid first appears. And I got nothing against Jimmy Olsen, but I mean, I kind of preferred, because even though, you know, they were one continuous story to a certain degree, really they were more, I do think, because before this, the editions that DC put out were in these black and white, like kind of newsprint, kind of cheap editions, and I kind of preferred those. I mean, I would go with I would start with Mr. Miracle #1,
right,
because it's probably the best overall series. I would read them all individually,
totally.
You know, and you can skip Jimmy Olsen.
Wow, what a take.
Jimmy, oh my goodness.
You know, I it's a really fun series, but it does not, it's the one that doesn't tie really, other than the fact Darkseid, it's the, you know, it's like a trivia question. It's what comic book did Darkseid first appear in, and it's
totally yeah, what a bonkers place to start him.
Yeah, I think of those early, like, original kind of Fourth World books, I think I first started reading Forever People, and that I kind of got lost. I'll admit I wasn't following.
That's the one that goes off the rails the quickest.
Yeah, it's pretty out there,
because they forced him to put Dead Man in the at the end, which made no sense. But this, you know, they're all really solid.
Yeah,
they're all really solid
for sure.
I mean, you know, frankly, if you really want to be hardcore, I'd start with Thor.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Right.
I'd start with Thor about the time Hercules shows up, and it's a good demarcation point, not just because I'm a Hercules fan, but because that's when the title changed from Journey into Mystery into Thor, which was
right.
And 20. I can't believe I know that off the top of my head, but yes, it's Thor 1. Start with Thor 120 and kind of go to the end of Kirby's run, and then go to.
And you're just starting to get into Thor right now.
Well, I'm reading like more modern Thor. I haven't gone back to like
but maybe that's the next move.
The Silver Age stuff. But
that'll be cool.
Yeah, I might have to.
It'd be interesting to see somebody who kind of followed my journey, who kind of started with the Stan Lee stuff, and then like it's kind of like as you're taking drugs. You need the harder and purer form of the drug to get high. With Thor, with all the cosmic stuff, because if you start right with the hardcore, you know, cosmic Kirby stuff, you might, you know,
right.
You're gonna OD. Yeah, it's too much for you. Yeah.
You haven't built up a tolerance to it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just gonna mainline Commandy right now. All right, let's leave Instagram and head on over to Reddit.
Where everyone's nice and no one's ever mean.
That's right.
Happiest place on earth.
That's right. Exactly.
4chan.
Oh God, yeah. No, I refuse. I can't.
And the one question we got from Reddit, which was from MadSeb77, what a question this is. His fourth world concept is very layered and structured. Do you think in the past 20 years that DC has overused this concept? It feels like the looming evil of Darkseid no longer has any layers.
Right.
Wow.
So do we feel that, I mean, obviously it's going to come and go. It's not all going to be one or the other, but do we feel the general arc of the use of the fourth world post Kirby has been good or in the right spirit or not?
You just remember again, made me think of our podcast where we have Frederick Wortham going, "Are comics good?"
If for the eventual like future restaging, I'll play Wortham. I'll do it. Yeah.
Hired.
Wow, put yourself right up there.
I love it when a different celebrity comes in each night in a show, and so
that's right. We'll have a different.
You're a celebrity.
I mean, I like how loose we're being with that word. So yeah.
Meryl Streep as Wortham tonight.
Yeah, Meryl Streep and then Reed.
There you go. I mean, I think the simple answer is yes, but all these concepts are ancient and reused and just because the thing is that except for hardcores like ourselves, the comic book audience, the superhero audience turns over every 5 years. So, it's new creators and it's new to them. Right. So they're like, what is this? This is crazy. I mean, it's got to burn DC's briskets that Marvel's Darkseid ripoff is a household word, even Darkseid is first appearing in a DC movie in about 2 weeks, and it's a recut and a re-release of another movie,
I mean, just gonna throw two kind of big takes on the fourth world out there just to see what you think of them. Morrison's big take, Final Crisis, and seeing versions of the new gods and stuff like that there,
right.
And then the Tom King, Mitch Gerard's Mr. Miracle series, both relatively recent interpretations of the fourth world. What do we feel about those? Are they good spiritual successors? Are they their own things? Like,
I think they're pretty much their own thing. I will confess that I have not read the Tom King Mr. Miracle one, so I can't comment. I generally enjoy Grant Morrison's stuff quite a lot. The thing that I think of that I like the most that he did with the New Gods was the Rock of Ages storyline in jail. Yeah, it was a good use of them as villains without kind of beating you over the head with it. I mean, like, it's interesting to sort of use. I think when Darkseid kind of gets reduced to a Superman villain, which is basically what he's been for the last 20 years or stuff, it does lessen somewhat his cosmic evil. But on the other hand, that's just, Kirby never, I think, the Eternals is in the class is that Kirby never wanted to be part of the Marvel universe, and the Marvel editors like, what? like they were a year into it, like, you've got to put the Hulk in there. All right.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So again, he gave him the middle finger and put in a robot Hulk that was built by superhero fans. You know what I mean?
Right.
Who refused to even, acknowledge. But then, the Eternals and everything got absorbed by the larger, Marvel mythology to the point where, the Celestials are why the Skrulls shapeshift is because the Celestials experiment on them, and Thanos is an Eternal, which people forget.
Right.
I
did not know that. I mean, I know so little about Marvel.
I know.
You can say basically anything.
You're like, wow.
Well, there's a line. Well, they at least have Josh Brolin say he's from the planet Titan. No, I guess it's the planet Titan, because in the comics he's from the moon Titan.
Oh, okay.
Around Saturn, which is where some faction of Earth's Eternals left Earth and went to Titan, and that's where Thanos was born.
Wait, Thanos is from our solar system?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my god.
Oh no.
He is an Eternal that was born looking like a deviant.
Wow.
The Eternal's enemies. And so that's why he's so messed up in the head. Because he was not treated very well as a kid.
Well, crazy. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bad for Thanos. That's when they made us sad.
That's right. That's why I love the movies kill me, because anytime Thanos is like, I'm going to kill half, like the comics, Thanos wants to kill everybody. And it's like, I'm going to kill half. It just makes me think of Dr. Evil, like $1 million.
Yeah. Just an arbitrary kind of number. Yeah.
Preserve reresources when I have godlike powers and I can just double the amount of resources in the universe. Nope, don't want to do that.
Too hard. No.
Also, it's a very specific piece of jewelry.
That's sort of why I sort of thought that I sort of thought that they missed a trick not doing the courting death thing, because at least then there's a reason for him to do the killing and not the making resources.
Kate Blanchett is death just sitting there.
Yeah, I thought that's what I thought was happening. I was like, why would you do God of Death like the movie before Avengers?
That's right.
Yeah. Oh well,
that's really funny.
Shows what I know.
It's interesting about the mythology, but to come back to just the times living in, the fact that Darkseid, even just in flipping through the book, it just was reminding me that there's like shades of Richard Nixon kind of in
yeah.
So there's this political nature, from Captain America to later, like that he's weaving in and speaking to the zeitgeist a bit too, to events currently.
Yeah, happening. Totally.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is really interesting.
This is true.
Love that.
And then there was also that one time that he had that fake sex tape with Superman and Nick Carter.
Oh my God, yeah.
That was John. That's John Byrne, who's a special human being.
Yeah.
All right, let's leave Reddit and head on over to our last platform, which is the Discord.
Oh, I didn't think of a thing for this.
Oh, do it now. Come up with a song. You got to do a song now. Doc scored. Do it now.
Doc scored like a lady.
Wow, that's the one you went to. Okay.
I couldn't think of it. I had to pick a different classic rock song, and I didn't.
It looks like a Doc scored, not even that.
So I had to do "Dude Looks Like a Lady."
Yeah. Wow,
that's all I got.
Wow, you really dropping the ball today.
I know. I got too excited. I was reading the play and stuff.
All right. First question comes from Flying Fox 1089, who asks, "Who is the better son overall, Orion or Mr. Miracle?"
There we go. It's a one or the other scenario.
Yes.
Who's the better son?
Choice.
Well, Mr. Miracle didn't get much of a chance to be a son since his dad traded him off to a murder orphanage. I mean, that's kind of rough. Well, it is funny just because the answer is Orion, but I do think about this, like, I mean, it is sort of like Kirby's relentless kind of humanistic outlook is that the son of the evil god Orion gets brought up on the good planet and he becomes a good guy. Mm-hmm. The good son of the good son of the good god gets traded to the evil people and he grows up to be a hero.
Yeah.
You'd think, a lot of people would just be like, no, Mr. Miracle actually would have been. I suppose that's an interesting Elseworlds concept. What if Mr. Miracle went evil? When full on apocalypse, but it just sort of shows you that that sort of Kirby's worldview is that nurture versus nature, good is gonna end up winning out.
A thing that I like in that Tom King one is that even though Granny Goodness is objectively bad and horrible and abused and tortured Mr. Miracle, he still kind of views her like parentally in that one. Like they have a sort of odd thing where he hates everything she stands for, but like he's sort of open with and to her. There's something kind of neat there.
She knows him, like nobody else in a way.
Yeah, exactly. There's something kind of neat there that I enjoy. All right, so we've got one vote for Orion. Crystal, who's the better son, Orion or Mr. Miracle?
It's so bland, but I'm gonna say Orion too because I love him.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But and visually, I think I think just the artwork with Orion is just so dynamic.
100%.
I love how unique that Astro harness design is.
I think got an Astro harness. I mean, if he showed up and he was like just told me what to do, I'd be like, oh yes, like
okay, yeah.
It's got an authoritative look.
Yeah.
So it's the themes, like Fred's saying, are so great to talk about because there's also strong themes with individuality as well, like also that you can, I mean, I think a lot of the comic book heroes do this, but that one's individual choices matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've talked about before that it's interesting too. You're talking about how, the good prevails, but also that Kirby went to the trouble of being like, there's like the bugs. There's like a lower class on the good planet, and also there's a lower class on the bad planet. So it's like everyone, like it's those kind of
bad.
There's some nuance in there that is kind of interesting.
And in terms of character design, I've just always been obsessed with the parademons. I think they are just wow. I want wallpaper of the parademons.
Like,
right?
They're a great design. My toddler has started running around the house saying, "Oh no, parademons," because I've been playing a Lego game and there's a lot of parademons in it.
That's adorable. Oh my God. I love that. That's so cute. All right. The very last question comes from We've Only Just Dan, who asks, how much do you think Kirby's military service informed his creativity?
A lot. I mean, we certainly spend a lot of time in the show about how much he couldn't stand General Patton, who he served under during the war, and how, later on, a lot of people did see a lot of connections, certainly with Nixon and Darkseid, but also Patton and Darkseid, because Patton would do things like yell at the soldiers when he was told that their unit had been wiped out, and he shows up and finds out they weren't,
right?
Because he saw people sort of, these sort of abstract pieces to move around the battlefield. I took from an interview. He said in an interview, I would have, George C. Scott, I would have fallen in hell. This guy was a piece of shit. that ended up in the play, in the show.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that when I was giving a lot of notes, which is organically with him. Fred was like, write this play with me. But he had, these really great drafts that then we were re-looking at elements of and writing the sequences of. But that's what got me very interested in his story, both from the biography that Fred was writing or how he was leaning into that, and also in the play, because I think there's just something so powerful about in the and we captured in the audio drama where he's saying, after going through these experiences of killing, of what he was forced to do, and he felt like he was becoming a monster inside, and that kind of, and then coming back to the human self, and I think that it's just so moving. And I guess I relate to that with my own life. I don't know if anyone here has family members that have served, but I know my dad with Vietnam was very much like, this is bullshit, just almost everybody is he's a hippie basically, like in the situation. Yeah. And then with my grandfather, he never spoke about it. And then I found all these war photos with, wow. That, and he has 2 Purple Hearts, but he never wanted to speak at that time ever. And wow. I think that's the case with a lot of people who serve. So I think there's just like his artwork and his use from the Lower East Side experiences to his resilience to the war has so much to do with fighting, yet keeping the human side of you and making sure that you keep that integral to you, because so I think there's just something so timeless about that for anyone.
And I mean, certainly, from that quote, and from just, his career of jumping back and forth when he felt it wasn't working anymore. Yeah. Like, he does seem to have a very sort of strict kind of personal code, which probably was a source of conflict in a military sense, where you're kind of supposed to put some of that stuff aside for, the mission or the bigger goal, right?
Yeah, I mean, very, and he's a superhero artist who we know killed people.
Yeah,
Those are there in history, most of the comics people who served ended up, stateside. They never left, and Kirby and a couple other people were rare exceptions to that.
Right.
I'd urge you to go and read that Tom King Mr. Miracle, because as somebody who also came from like a military background and then jumped into Kirby's work, it's interesting.
Yeah, maybe he saw something in there, because there is a lot of like the horrors of war kind of thing in that book too.
Yeah, and then with like Tom King's next piece that he started working on too, you're getting
Strange Adventures is also horrors of war. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a theme there.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's great.
That's so cool.
Well, those are the ends of the questions. But before we end the episode, it's time for everyone's favorite game.
I'm ready.
Can you guess the name of the character based on how someone who does not read comic books can describe that character to us? If you don't know this game, I send a photo of a DC character to my wife, who neither cares nor really ever reads comic books, and she sends back 4 clues describing what she sees.
Wow.
So I know who it is. So no one else does.
The clues aren't even necessarily about the character. They're literally just visually what she sees in an image.
Yeah. And our guests and the doctor will just try to figure out who she's referring to.
You can guess as many times as you like. You can pass and wait for another clue. There's no wrong way to play.
I have themed this one in Jack Kirby's universe.
Okay.
That's
good.
To add some simplicity.
Some parameters.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Okay. So, first clue. Ginger.
Just ginger.
Just ginger.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry, I missed that one.
I have to guess after every clue.
Fred knows.
You can.
What did you say?
Well, if we're talking about, I said all right, but
okay, sorry.
Yes, the answer. That was the answer.
But you want to guess first?
I think I've got
what?
it.
No, not already.
I mean, probably not, but I have one.
Let's. If you think you've got it and you're confident.
Okay. I'll wait.
Okay, you're gonna wait. Okay.
Crystal or Fred, do you want to throw a clue in there, or a guess rather?
Assuming that refers to somebody with red hair, the problem is that the way these characters are colored is not terribly consistent.
Yeah.
I can think of a bunch of red-haired DC Jack Kirby characters. The main one is Jason Blood.
Oh no, but that's a good guess.
That is a good guess. Yeah.
But Glorious Godfrey is also known to have red hair.
Oh no, but I see. Look, there's a lot.
I was going to say Light Ray.
It's Light Ray. It's Light Ray.
Is it actually?
Yeah.
But again, he often has orange or blonde hair. So
that's true.
It depends on what picture you showed her. That's
very true.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm curious to hear what the other clues.
Wow.
Where would this have gone from Ginger?
Just Ginger. Wow, that's crazy. So the other clues were: second clue is mask covers everything but their face.
Sure.
Then I would have gotten Light Ray.
Oh yeah. The third clue is another suit that points to their crotch. Yep. Yeah. A very common thing in DC, as we're noticing.
Yes.
And the final is if the KKK created a superhero.
What? Because he's all in white?
Because he's all in white, and it's this like menacing red symbol in the middle of it, and it's like there's like an Aryan vibe going on there. Yeah.
I mean, if you don't read anything about him.
Yes, that's based on it.
Yet that conflicts with her. The mask covers everything but his face.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, no.
I'll have to push back gently against that.
Yeah. Let's send that clue back. Let's.
Yeah, no. It was their hero. The hero could show their face. That's the biggest difference.
This is great. This is like what's is it Muppets Now that we're watching? Is it the new one?
Pepe the Shrimp has a game show.
This feels like one of Pepe's game show games.
Yeah, I think that's pretty. I'm gonna take that as a compliment.
Conflating us to Muppets makes a lot of sense.
I love that seasons 4 and 5 are now up on Disney Plus, because I had the DVDs for the first 3 seasons, and I've just been waiting.
That's really exciting. That's awesome. Well, that is the end of our show. But before we go, please, first of all, thank you so much, Fred and Crystal, for coming on this episode.
Yeah, thank you.
Promote your stuff. Let's talk about the play. Talk about where people can find this new audio drama. Sure. Where can people find you online in general to talk to you about all this cool stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the easiest thing to do is that because we're on Spotify and iTunes and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, is just put King Kirby in the search field and subscribe. Awesome. And boom, you're going to get all the episodes. You can also get downloaded at Broadway Podcast Network.com.
Yep.
Wait, just like me.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
If you want any fun little goodies or behind the scene things, we have an Instagram, King Kirby Play, at King Kirby Play, and we're also on Twitter at King Kirby Play. So if you like what you're listening, or you want to ask questions or talk to us, tweet us, write us on Instagram.
I guess if you are a huge theater nerd, on March 1st, Broadway Podcast Network will be launching its own
That's
app.
That's tomorrow.
It is. I don't know.
Whoa.
Oh, geez, Louise. Yeah. Wow.
But so yeah, and then everything will be on there. And then after the final episode drops on March 3rd, a week after that, we're going to be doing a great 1 hour sort of behind the scenes cast and crew roundtable conducted by our buddy Rob Salkowitz at Forbes magazine. And he did a really great job. And that turned out really great.
Wow.
Awesome. So cool.
That's amazing.
Thank you so much for making the time to talk King Kirby, to talk Jack.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thank you both.
And any residents who are listening that want to reach out to us about this stuff, you can reach us through our various social media platforms, such as our Facebook,
Dr. DC Podcast,
Twitter,
at Dr. DC,
Instagram,
Dr. DC Podcast,
email,
drdcpodcast@gmail.com.
of course, our subreddit,
r/Dr_DC.
You can always give us a phone call.
208-917-3238.
Go to our website,
drdcpodcast.com/.ca.
Nailing these right now. Oh, yeah, baby. 5-star reviews. We always want those.
Yep.
You can go to subscribe to our Patreon, $5, $7 level. Ton of extra content every single week.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a whole other podcast. If you love the TV show Supernatural, we have an entire podcast where we review every episode every single week.
That's
called
right.
Ghost Facers.
That's right.
That is it for this week. Fred and Crystal, thank you so much. Reed, I guess I appreciate you coming back.
Oh, thanks.
every
Yeah,
week.
good. Awesome.
Yeah, whatever. And that's it. Say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Ciao, ciao.
Adios.
Heroes, they always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure, they are men of...
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.